The Tuesday evening began like any other in the Quint penthouse, quiet, orderly, immaculately curated. Amara Quint, the heiress to one of the most powerful media empires in America, sat in her study bathed in the soft glow of Manhattan's skyline. Her father's empire was now her responsibility. The New York Chronicle, several television stations, digital properties, all bearing the legacy of Robert Quint. She carried that weight with elegance, discipline, and an uncheckable sense of control. Until 8:43 p.m., her phone buzzed. Not her assistant's update, not the Chronicle's newsroom pings. This was personal, an Instagram message. Curious, she turned the screen. Amara, I'm so sorry to be the one to send this to you. I just thought you should know. Beneath, the text was a blurry screenshot of an Instagram story. The breath caught in her throat. The image was unmistakably her bedroom, their bedroom. The reclaimed wood headboard, the Calder mobile, even the familiar angle of light from the antique. Sconces. But it was what, or rather who was in the photo, that made her blood run cold. Woman, young, raven-haired, touting into the mirror with her phone, wearing nothing but Julian's gray Vanette cashmere sweater. Her Julian. The caption read, "Where? I belong." The account? At Siena Russo. Amara's world collapsed into a tunnel of silence. Her hand trembled. She felt herself spiraling, but caught it just before the fall. The first wave of pain was primal, but it was quickly overtaken by something colder, sharper, more dangerous. Rage. Not the hysterical, screaming kind. This was something far more terrifying. An inheritance, really what her father called Quint blood. A fury so focused it became precision. Julian Croft, her husband of 20 years. Her polished other half. The man she defended in boardrooms, at dinner tables, and profile features and galas. He hadn't just cheated, he had desecrated the sanctum of their home. He had allowed this woman to touch her world, wear her clothes, sleep in her bed. And this woman had the audacity to gloat. This wasn't carelessness. It was war. She stared at the photo again. Not just a selfie, a message. It wasn't just infidelity. It was invasion. Amara stood slowly, her breath now even, her mind sharper than it had been in years. She moved to the window. Manhattan glittered beneath her, the city her family helped. Shaped through headlines, through political influence, through whispered threats behind closed doors, her father's words echoed. Information is the only currency that matters. And we own the bank. She turned back to her desk, picked up her secure line, and dialed David Chum, the Chronicle's editor-in-chief. A loyal warhorse of a man who had stood by her father. Through scandals and upheavals, he answered grudgingly, "Amara, everything all right? It's late." "I need you to stop the presses," she said, her voice like cold steel. A pause. "The edition's already running," he said cautiously. "What happened?" "I'm sending a file to your encrypted line." "It's your new front page." Another pause. "You're serious?" "Very." She forwarded the photo. A few heartbeats later, silence. "Jesus Christ," David breathed. "Wanted on the cover. Full page, no blur." Caption: Julian Croft's mistress makes herself at home. "You can't be serious, Amara. This is your personal life. You'll be lighting a match to your entire world. Your marriage, the company, the board. I don't recall asking for your permission," she snapped. "That woman stepped into my bedroom and took a photograph. Julian let her. And now, I'm doing what the Chronicle does best, reporting truth." David didn't answer for a moment. "Then, what do you want the byline to say?" "No byline," she said. "Let it speak for itself." When the call ended, Amara stood in the middle of her study, surrounded by the quiet power her family had accumulated for generations. The serpentine rage in her chest had transformed, no longer hot and uncoiled. Now it was refined, laser-focused, She wasn't going to cry. She wasn't going to confront Julian in tears or beg for answers. She wasn't going to give him that power. She would do what her father would have done. She'd burn his illusion to the ground. The sun had not yet risen, but Manhattan was already ablaze at precisely 5 a.m. Delivery trucks fanned out across the city like veins from a heart, pumping the freshly printed New York Chronicle into the hands of commuters, newsstands, private clubs, and media monitoring firms. By 5:15, the world began to see it. The front page had no lead article, no headline font smaller than 72 points. Just a full-color, full-page image, a raven-haired woman in a cashmere sweater, posing triumphantly in the mirrored reflection of Amara. Quint's bedroom. Below, in bold serif letters, Julian Croft's mistress makes herself at home, no explanation. No context. No comment from Amara, the newspaper's publisher, but everyone knew. By 7 a.m., the story had gone viral. Every major morning show opened with it. Social media exploded into chaos. Some people assumed it was a hoax, a doctored photo. Others whispered it had to be intentional. No accident could have made it onto the Chronicle's cover without approval. By 8:30 a.m., Julian Croft's name was trending worldwide. At 9:12 a.m., he finally saw it. He had woken in a luxury suite at the Mercer Hotel, having stayed out late finalizing a luxury condo development pitch. Sienna was gone off to a photo shoot in Tribeca. He'd only noticed her tagged Instagram post had been deleted. When his phone buzzed with a barrage of calls, he ignored the first few, groggy and annoyed, until he opened the Chronicle app. His blood froze. No. Julian bolted upright, the sheets tangling around him like vines. He stared at the image, unblinking. His wife hadn't confronted him. She hadn't screamed or filed for divorce. She had published. He dialed Amara. No answer. He tried her assistant, her attorney, her driver. Silence. He paced the room, his hands running through his hair, heart pounding. Every investor, every client, every architect he'd ever worked with was seeing this right now. The narrative wasn't Julian had affair. It was Julian Croft brought his mistress into the heart of the Quint dynasty. And now Amara had declared war. At the Chronicle headquarters, Midtown Manhattan, Amara stepped into the building at 9:30 a.m., dressed in navy cashmere and heels that echoed sharply down the marble corridor. Staff turned and whispered. She didn't blink. David Chen was waiting outside her office, dark bags under his eyes and 2 espressos in hand. "You've started a media earthquake," he said, falling into step beside her. "Good," Amara replied. "Let it level the liars first." Inside, her executive team waited nervously. PR staff, legal counsel, digital leads, they stood like soldiers awaiting orders. "Let's be clear," Amara began, setting her handbag down with surgical precision. "This was not a scandal. It was an act of ownership Julian Croft made. His choices, I simply printed the consequences." The room was silent. Her lawyer, Natalie Greer, finally spoke. "The board will be nervous, Amara. Personal retaliation through the paper. Some may see it as a conflict of interest." "Then they're free to resign," Amara said coolly. "I own 62% of Quint Media. If anyone wants to test my authority, they'll find themselves very publicly unemployed." Natalie opened her mouth again, but Amara raised a finger. "I am done hiding shame that isn't mine. If a man dares to humiliate me in my own home, he will not walk away unscathed. He will crawl out of this city if he must." David gave a small cough. "Julian's firm is issuing a statement, claiming the relationship began after a temporary separation, that the woman was unaware of his marriage. Then they've chosen fiction," Amara interrupted. "Let's give them facts." She turned to a young staffer, Pull every relevant building permit and renovation blueprint Julian signed under our firm's joint holdings. I want to know if he used my funds, my name, or our home in any official capacity. Am the mistress? David asked carefully. Sienna Russo, Amara said flatly. Age 28, former model. Now working with a luxury lifestyle brand. I want her employment history, tax records, publicist, agents, known associates. If she plans to monetize my suffering, we'll be ahead of her every step. At Croft Design Group, chaos reigned. Investors were pulling back. Calls were unanswered. Julian arrived red-eyed, trying to look composed. His head of communications met him with a frantic look. This is nuclear, Julian. Even our clean projects are being flagged. People are calling you the man who desecrated the Quint family legacy. I'll release a statement, he said, trying to calm himself. Apologize for the photo. Clarify that the affair never interfered with my business. She owns the business, Julian, his comms director snapped. You slept with a woman in her bed. This isn't PR, it's personal suicide. By 3 p.m., the Chronicle's Evening Edition published an editorial. When betrayal moves in a world where women are expected to suffer silently, it's revolutionary to speak aloud. Louder still to speak from the front page of Power. This is not a domestic affair, it's a cultural reckoning. If the sanctity of marriage can be violated within the safest rooms of a home, let it be judged in the light. The Chronicle believes in truth. Even when it costs everything. That night, Amara returned to the penthouse. Julian was there, waiting in the living room like a man on trial. You destroyed me, he said hoarsely. No, she said, walking past him. You destroyed yourself. I simply made sure the world watched. You didn't even let me explain. There's no explanation that removes her from my bed, Amara said, turning slowly to face him. You underestimated me, Julian. You mistook my grace for permission, but I am my father's daughter. He looked at her, as if for the first time. You're not the woman I married. She gave a sad smile. Exactly. She walked away, heels clicking like a judge's gavel, the city sprawling beneath her feet. Next episode, collateral damage. As alliances begin to crumble and the media frenzy escalates, Amara discovers the affair was just the tip of the iceberg. Financial entanglements, lies buried in boardrooms, and a mistress with secrets of her own push her toward an even more dangerous truth, one that could destroy more than just her marriage. 3 days after the front page scandal, the world had moved from shock to obsession. Talk shows analyzed every frame of the photo like it was a political assassination. Magazine covers screamed, the billionaire wife who bit back, mistress. Mansion, media meltdown. Amara Quint, queenmaker or executioner. But the headlines were the least of Julian's problems. Investors were fleeing. His reputation was ash, and Amara was just getting started. Amara's office, Chronicle Tower to 10 a.m. David. Chun arrived with a folder so thick it looked like a subpoena. The background on Sienna Russo, he said, dropping it on Amara's desk. She didn't look up from her espresso. Summarize. She's not who she pretends to be. Changed her name at 22. Real name, Sophia Russo. Father did time for fraud. She's been linked to 2 high-profile businessmen, both scandals. Both ended with NDAs and payouts. Payouts from who? Amara asked, finally raising her eyes. David smirked grimly. That's the fun part. One of the bank accounts is tied to Lanswell Partners. Amara's expression hardened. Lanswell was a private equity firm, deeply entangled with Julian's architecture. Projects, especially the multi-million-dollar luxury complex they'd been planning together. The Halcyon, she stood slowly. I want everything Lanswell has touched in the last 5 years. I want offshore accounts, political donations, everything. And I want our Chronicle investigative unit on it quietly. David hesitated. Are you sure this is about Julian? She turned to him, voice low. This was never just about Julian. That girl didn't just wander into my home. Someone sent her. Meanwhile, Julian's world crumbled further at Croft Design Group. The board had convened an emergency meeting. Julian arrived with apologies, explanations, and a freshly written statement. He didn't make it through half of it before he was interrupted. We're terminating your role as CEO, said Thomas Ellery, his oldest investor, effective immediately. Julian's? Hands clenched. You can't do that. I built this firm. No, Julian, Thomas said coldly. You married it. And now the marriage is over? At the Chronicle, Mara sat with Natalie Greer, her lawyer, reviewing Julian's financial footprint. He's been using shell accounts through Lanswell to route personal expenses, Natalie explained. Vacations, designer gifts, some of them. Likely went to Sienna. Worse, the Halcyon deal was partially funded using shares from your joint trust. Without your signature. That's forgery, Amara said. It's also fraud, Natalie added. We could have him indicted if we want. Amara stared at the ledger. You don't bring a woman into my bed and steal from my name. She whispered. He's going to lose more than his career. He's going to lose his freedom. She turned the page, then she stopped. There, buried in the records, was a payment. 6 months prior. A wire transfer to Sienna Russo for $175,000, labeled consulting services. Amara's fingers tightened around the paper. This wasn't an affair, Dot. It was a transaction. She pulled her phone, dialed David Chun. Find out what services she was offering Julian, she said, and follow the money. That evening, a knock on Amara's door she opened. It to find a young woman in a sleek trench coat and large sunglasses. Nervous. She removed her glasses slowly. I'm not here to cause trouble, the woman said. Amara narrowed her eyes. You're already in the middle of it. I'm not proud of what I did, but I need you to know the truth. Sienna Russo stepped into the apartment and looked around the towering living room like a tourist in a museum. I never meant to fall for him. Amara didn't flinch. You fell for his wallet? No, Sienna said quietly. I fell for his promises. But that's not why I came. She pulled a flash drive from her coat. Julian didn't just lie to you. He lied to a lot of people. I kept records, calls, notes, proof. Why give them to me? Sienna looked down. Because I'm done being used. And because I think someone tried to use me too. Amara studied her. You're scared. I should be, Sienna said, because what you're about to see isn't about cheating anymore. Later that night, Amara played the files. The audio was fuzzy but unmistakable. Julian speaking to someone, a male voice. Discussing Halcyon. Phrases jumped out like blades. We moved the assets offshore before the permits hit. She never noticed. She's too busy playing queen. Sienna can keep her distracted. Amara's blood ran cold. Dot. It hadn't been a seduction. Dot. It was a setup. Julian hadn't just betrayed her marriage. He had orchestrated a slow theft of her company, her trust, her legacy, using a woman planted in her life like a bomb with lipstick. This wasn't infidelity. Dot. This was conspiracy. She closed her laptop, heart pounding with clarity. Dot. Tomorrow, she wouldn't just be filing for divorce. She'd be filing criminal charges. Dot. Next episode, the reckoning, with hard evidence in hand. Amara begins to dismantle the empire Julian tried to steal from her. But exposing corruption comes with a cost, and someone in the shadows wants to silence Sienna before she talks. As secrets collide with ambition, Amara must choose justice or vengeance. The city awoke to headlines darker than gossip. Quint heiress to press charges. Croft under criminal investigation. Affair was a cover financial scandal unfolds in billionaire divorce. Mistress Hermole. The Sienna Russo files. But these headlines weren't written by tabloids. They were published by The Chronicle. Amara Quint didn't hide behind lawyers. She led with a press release. The personal betrayal I suffered is eclipsed only by the calculated attempt to defraud. The Quint family legacy. The public deserves truth. The courts will handle the rest. In under 72 hours, she had frozen Julian's assets, filed charges through the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and initiated a forensic audit of all projects under Croft Design Group and Lanswell Partners. But Amara wasn't just focused on punishment. She was drawing a map of every betrayal. 10 o'clock. A.M. Chronicle Tower. Private conference room. Sienna Russo sat at the far end of the long oak table, pale and tight-lipped. Her lawyer sat beside her, silent, occasionally tapping a folder with nervous fingers. Amara sat across from her, calm, impeccable in charcoal silk. David Chun and Natalie Greer flanked her like trusted sentries. Amara placed the flash drive on the table. This, she said, shows premeditated fraud. Offshore transfers, shell company laundering, permit tampering. You were part of it, whether you intended to be or not. Sienna didn't argue. I was supposed to distract you, she whispered. He said you were too cold, too powerful. That you'd never look his way. He said all you cared about was your empire. Amara leaned forward. He used your insecurity the way he used my name. What I care about is truth. She nodded to Natalie, who slid a document forward. Testify. Natalie said, sign this affidavit. Confirm the dates, the meetings, the setup. You help bring them down, we protect you. Sienna hesitated. Then she signed. Later that day, Julian's arrested was quiet. Dignified. No sirens. No spectacle. Just two plainclothes. Detectives meeting him outside his lawyer's office, informing him of the charges: fraud, misappropriation of funds, forgery, and conspiracy to commit financial deception. Julian went pale. This is insane, he hissed. She's doing this for revenge? The lead detective raised an eyebrow. No, Mr. Croft. She's doing this for justice. Amara watched it unfold on her office screen. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. Her fingers curled around her coffee cup with quiet satisfaction. The man who had desecrated her trust. Her home, her name now photographed walking into federal custody. Across the city, CEOs, board members, and power brokers read the reports in silence. Everyone had admired Julian and Amara once. Now, they feared her, and that was exactly how she wanted it. That evening, at the penthouse, David Chun dropped by unannounced, holding a manila envelope. There's something else you need to see, he said, setting it on the marble counter. Inside, a series of emails. Between Julian and a Lanswell executive. But one name jumped out at Amara. Charles Wentworth. She froze. Wentworth had been her father's closest advisor, a silent partner in the family trust. A man she had kept on after Robert Quint's death out of loyalty. She reread the email. If Amara gets suspicious, remind her of her father's real legacy. She doesn't want that dragged into daylight. Amara felt ice in her veins. David, she said slowly, where did you get this? A leak from inside Lanswell. Someone wants this known, but anonymously. Amara stared into the distance. The betrayal was deeper than she thought. This wasn't just Julian. This was her father's circle. People she had trusted all her life. Suddenly, her victory over Julian felt smaller. There were bigger enemies, older lies, and the warning was clear. If Amara digs too far, she'll regret it. Later that night, alone on the penthouse balcony, the city glittered as it always had. Oblivious to the war within its towers, Amara stood with a glass of red wine, heart pounding with thoughts. Julian had underestimated her. Sienna had been a pawn. But the real threat, the real rot, went deeper. Her father's legacy wasn't just stained by Julian. It had been built on secrets she had never dared to question. Was her dynasty as righteous as she believed? Had she inherited power or corruption in a crown? The serpent in her chest uncoiled again, but it wasn't rage. This time, it was resolve. She whispered to herself. If there's a reckoning to be had, let it start with me. Next episode, The Legacy, finale, with Julian behind bars and Sienna in protective custody. Amara turns her attention to the deeper betrayal, the one rooted in the very foundation of her family empire. As she confronts the sins of her father, she must decide, will she protect the Quint name or destroy it for the sake of truth? Or so it seemed. Julian Croft was now awaiting trial, his mugshot a fixture on every news cycle. The Chronicle's front page had become a symbol not of scandal, but of reclamation. Amara Quint, once the quiet force behind the throne, now stood alone at the top of her empire. But beneath the accolades, the magazine profiles, the polite nods from boardrooms that once doubted her, Amara was restless because she knew the truth. Julian hadn't orchestrated everything alone. The real architects of betrayal were older, smarter, hidden in the shadows of her own dynasty. And now she would smoke them out. The vault, a room few knew existed in the Chronicle Tower's sub-basement, behind a locked steel door coded only to her fingerprint and retinal scan, lay the legacy files of Robert Quint, old contracts, handwritten notes, safe deposit keys, ledgers so confidential they'd never been digitized. Amara stood in the center of the vault, surrounded by decades of power, wealth, and silence. She opened a brown leather folder titled Landtoll Partnership 2001 for board review. Inside, the truth began to unfold. Donations to political candidates made in other names. Land acquisitions via shell firms that bulldozed tenant. Housing, surveillance of journalists who questioned her father's influence. And most damning of all, a handwritten note from Charles Wentworth. If we keep the Chronicle clean on paper, the rest can get buried under credibility. The press is only a weapon if no one suspects it's loaded. Amara sank into the leather chair in the corner of the vault. Her entire life, she had believed her father built an empire of integrity, but now she saw the truth. The Chronicle wasn't just a force for good. It had been a tool for leverage, for silence, for control, and Amara had inherited it all. A private meeting, Charles Wentworth's estate in Westchester, he greeted her with forced warmth. An old man in an impeccable suit, sipping brandy like nothing had changed. You've come to ask if it's true, he said before she even sat down. I already know it is, Amara said. I've seen the files. He tilted his head. Then why are you here? Because you were my father's closest friend. Because you watched me take this empire over and smiled like you believed in me. I did believe in you, he said softly. I still do, which is why I'll tell you this. If you expose this, you won't just destroy Julian. You'll unravel everything your father built. The Chronicle will fall. Quint Media will be gutted. The board will sell it to foreign capital within months. Your name will mean nothing. She stared at him. You're afraid of what I might do, she said. I'm afraid of what you'll lose, he corrected. Your family's legacy. Your power, your father's ghost. Amara's dead. Then let me make it easy for you, she said. I don't believe in ghosts. And I'd rather burn down a lie than rule over one. The next morning, a new front page, no photos, no scandal, no headlines of betrayal. Just one editorial, written in Amara's own hand. The truth beneath the tower. For over a century, the Quint family has shaped the narrative of this city. We told stories. We made kings. We buried scandals. Today, I begin telling the story we bury at the deepest our own. I have discovered that the very institution I inherited, the Chronicle, was built, at times, on silence paid for by power. It's not a revelation I make lightly, but silence is no longer an option. If I am to lead this empire, it must be founded, not on reputation, but on responsibility. And if that means losing everything to earn back the truth, so be it. To my readers, hold me accountable. To the board, your silence is complicity. And to my father, wherever his soul resides, may he forgive me not for exposing his sins, but for refusing to continue them. Amara Quint, the city reacts. The media exploded again, but this time not with scandal, with reverence. She had done the unthinkable. A billionaire had exposed her own power structure, risked everything, and emerged not broken, but invincible. The Chronicle's subscriptions doubled within a week. International outlets hailed her as the woman who dismantled her own dynasty to rebuild it in daylight. And behind the scenes, the board members who had once plotted behind closed doors, they resigned, one by one, because in the age of spectacle and secrets, Amara Quint had chosen something more dangerous: truth. Final scene, the penthouse. Dusk, the sun sank behind Manhattan's skyline, casting a golden hue over the living room. Amara stood alone, barefoot, glass of wine in hand, staring at the now empty space where Julian's favorite sculpture once stood. Sienna Russo had left the city. Witness protection would shield her now. Julian awaited trial, his empire in ruins. And Amara? She had kept the name, but not the illusion. She walked to her private study, opened a fresh journal. At the top of the first page, she wrote, "Legacy isn't inherited. It's chosen." She closed the book, turned up the light, and walked into a future no longer built on glass but granite. The end, unless you want a sequel. Let me know if you'd like a follow-up series, maybe about the trial, Sienna's unexpected rise, or Amara building a new media revolution.